Welcome to By-The-Bywater, a podcast on the Megaphonic Network. I'm Ned Raggett.
I'm Oriana Schwint.
I'm Jared Pekacek.
And we're here to talk about all things J.R.R. Tolkien, his work, his inspirations and impact, creative interpretations in other media, languages, lore, rip-offs, parodies, anything we think is interesting. Thanks for joining us. Hello and welcome to the 61st episode of By-The-Bywater. It is great to be back with you here, and the three of us are all here, and we have just celebrating our 5th anniversary. That is what this episode is. We made it 5 years, guys. Wow.
Woo. That's so many years.
I'm thinking about everything that's happened to us collectively and individually over the past 5 years.
It's a lot.
Wow.
We have gone through things. The world's honestly gone through things. It is very weird to think about. It's like, what? Huh? And all that. I will spare everyone the sentimentalizing of how we started the whole podcast. You can get that on episode 50 when we did our live episode. But I'll just say, yeah, hey, good run. And we'll just keep it going. So It is all good. We are enjoying, I guess, our late winter, early spring as we get into all this. And right now, both my co-hosts hate me. But
yeah.
More on that. A lot more on that.
This is the one that fractures the fellowship.
Yeah.
No, it is broken. Oh no. Was I the Boromir or was I the
You're the
what
ring.
Did I do? Great, yes, I probably was.
We're gonna cast you into the fire.
Help. All right, well, with my fate decided.
Episode 61, the one where Ned dies.
Very unusual editing in this episode. So, let's see. With that said, there is, for once, after these past couple of months where it's been kind of ridiculous news, although amusing news, we actually have news this time around. So, before we get into the thing and all that, we do want to talk about that. So, Jared, please do take it away.
Yeah, it's been so fluffy the last few months, but we do definitely have some major news that's dropped. HarperCollins have announced their newest Tolkien publication, The Collected Poems of J.R.R. Tolkien, currently due for release in mid-September. This is a 3-volume effort that draws on his extensive works published both during and after his lifetime. A large number of hitherto unpublished poems will be included in the end result. This collection will be edited by longtime Tolkien scholars and editors Wayne G. Hammond and Christina Scull, who posted an extensive entry on their blog about what went into preparing this collection, why it's not a truly complete overview, and the history of its preparation, including the fact that Christopher Tolkien gave initial encouragement to their plans for the volumes before his death in early 2020. We'll have more on this closer to the time of publication, plus a link to Hammond and Scull's blog entry with all the details we know in our show notes. On a much less salubrious note, Amazon have added to the weariness of this world by announcing that the showrunners of The Rings of Power, Patrick McKay or whatever, and J.D. Payne have apparently begun work planning for season 3 of the show, with the studio signing them to an overall 3-year deal that is presumed to cover the original planning for 5 seasons for the show. Great.
Wonderful.
Can't wait.
Yeah.
So excited.
It's the puree, the slurry that will result of this. The off-brand mayo.
Yeah. Honestly, Sword of Shannara felt like season 1 of The Rings of Power.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what secretly was happening, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
So, yes. So as we worry about that looming on the horizon, the collected poems. Sure. I mean, this seems kind of crazy ambitious. I mean, 3 volumes all at once. I mean, I
didn't think there was that much.
What?
I mean, there's, it is quite possible that we're going to get just a little more stuff that adds to Middle-earth conceptually and all that. It could be that some of these, a lot of these unpublished ones are more ones on other subjects, which might be more, I don't know, illustrative of just general concerns, you could say, and things like that. I guess we'll find out. It's not that the poetry has always been a sticking point with Tolkien. It is something pretty intrinsic to a lot of what he does. But I think for a lot of people, it sort of functions in doses, I guess is the best way to put it. I could be wrong. It's one to contemplate. But still, Hammond and Scull absolutely know their business. They know this work backwards and forwards in terms of prep and all that. They may well have some very interesting insights to bring to bear. So I'll be intrigued, but especially, given its size, 1,500 pages, I have a feeling more people are going to be buying the electronic version of this.
Yeah, I don't have the shelf space. We have a 1-bedroom apartment in New York. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. It's like, man, my Tolkien bookshelves are just right set up. I really can't add any more, and now they're adding this. I'm like,
It's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a lot. So
truly, what is going to be in it is my question, because it's like he like we know he wrote a lot. But did he really write 3 volumes? And I know there's commentary and stuff in there too. But like, what is going in? Are we including drafts of stuff? What is happening?
Surely,
it's bananas to me that there's that much.
I mean, the notes indicated that they're drawing on everything from not merely just things like the Lays of Beleriand, but stuff like the Fall of Arthur and the other things that were the translations published, and all that. I suppose, ironically, we won't be getting Beowulf since that was all prose. Having just talked about that, but yeah, no, I will be intrigued, but this one, I approach the nature of Middle-earth with, due interest because of precisely what it is, and it is very interesting. Fall of Numenor was its own thing. This one is more sort of like, ooh, this is for the technically committed, this one. So,
oh, yeah.
I think I can promise everyone in advance, you listeners out there, I don't see us doing a full episode on this one because 1,500 pages to get through the episode. Using this for reference or something like that. We will see. But there we are. One final quick thing to note. I had expressed a hope that we might be getting a War of the Rohirrim trailer with Dune Part 2. We did not. Instead, it was the Godzilla vs. Kong movie, which, we're also thrilled about. Maybe it'll be
just as good.
Yeah. Maybe we'll be excited about that one. But,
I mean, they're both cartoons, so,
True. But, anyway, so who knows? Something will surface. They're still playing their cards close to their chest. Release date is still December. So again, something will surface at some point. But instead of talking about that, we got something else to talk about. And my co-hosts. Oh man, if I could have been stabbed several times through the computer screens over these past couple of weeks, I would have. I come to you now metaphorically bleeding and dying. But,
yeah, my husband was like, "Oh my God, you're still trying to read that book." I was like, Yes, I am.
Well, it's time to share the pain with you all. It was my choice of topic, and so I will begin. So let's make it clear from the start, because we're under no illusions here, and you shouldn't be either. Whatever we have to say, Terry Brooks has long since laughed his way to the bank. Born in 1944 in Illinois, and a Seattle dweller for many years now, the former attorney is coming up on 50 years of publishing success that most authors anywhere would envy, having over 20 books that have appeared on the New York Times bestseller list, and having sold something over 25 million books in total, if not more, during that time. He's known for not just one, but 2 extensive fantasy series, while also having started a third in 2021. He also did the writing honors for one of the most commercially successful movie novelizations ever, Star Wars Episode I: The Phantom Menace, and has had his own work adapted for TV in turn. He has absolutely succeeded in a goal that began in high school to be a successful writer, and we get it. The thing is, though, it all began with a book that was published in 1977 called The Sword of Shannara. It is very clearly a ripoff of a lot of The Lord of the Rings, and it is terrible. By his own account, Brooks was both a driven writer and voracious reader in his school days. His juvenile efforts were a wide variety of genre exercises in science fiction and westerns, as well as general fiction and nonfiction. Among his early favorites, by his own admission, are an amalgam of the kind of very dude-focused adventure stories that have held a long sway from the 19th century forward. Walter Scott, Robert Louis Stevenson, Alexander Dumas, Arthur Conan Doyle's medieval set works, and so forth. He also openly credits William Faulkner as another particular source of inspiration for the Sword of Shannara, but more on that later.
Much more.
It's probably no surprise that when he was introduced to Tolkien and The Lord of the Rings early in his college years, at the height of the initial boom in popularity in America in the mid-60s, he rapidly fell in love with it. Wanting to combine that sense of sweep and scope with the previously mentioned author's sense of rollicking adventure, particularly Scott and Stevenson, he began working on The Sword of Shannara in 1967 as a distraction from his then recent start in law school. He continued such work for the next 7 years before beginning to submit his manuscript for consideration. Donald A. Wollheim at DAW Books rejected it, but referred it to Judy Lynn Del Rey at Ballantine. She in turn passed it to her husband Lester, who became Brooks's editor. The book was used to help launch the Del Rey publishing imprint in particular in 1977, along with another Tolkien-tinged fantasy, Lord Fowl's Bane by Stephen R. Donaldson, and Piers Anthony's first Xanth book, A Spell for Chameleon. And not to mention some help from Judy Lynn's own canny decision to pick up a novelization for a science fiction effort out that year called Star Wars. We'll link an essay from last year about Lester Del Rey with more about all this in our show notes, because it's incredibly clear that he was absolutely looking for something in a Tolkien vein in the worst way possible. And he got it. As noted, there's no question that the book was a roaring success, the more so because of a clever double publication strategy, with a hardcover edition via Random House and a trade paperback edition on Del Rey. The latter in particular led sales, providing Brooks with his first NYT bestseller list appearance, while also helping to establish the format further. Both editions also featured illustrations by the Hildebrandt brothers, who had already established themselves as the predominant American illustrators of Tolkien in that decade. 2 further books followed over the next few years in that initial trilogy, and things have gone from there as indicated. But just as clearly, writers and reviewers started saying soon afterwards that something else was also incredibly clear. The Sword of Shannara wasn't just inspired by Tolkien and The Lord of the Rings, it was almost hitting every beat of it as it went, on top of everything else thrown in. We'll have much more to say about this in our discussion. A couple of things to say by way of introduction. First, unlike Dennis McKiernan, whose Silver Call books we discussed 4 years ago, Brooks provides a certain weird variety to the end results, a key point being the geography, which, while its own crazy mess, isn't a near cloning of the Middle-earth map at least. Second, in one of the most bafflingly okay then, twists you can imagine, it's not set in an imagined historical past, but, honest to God, a post-atomic future, in effect making it science fiction dressed up in fantasy drag, if you like, but that may perhaps be giving it too much credit. Third, and we'll give both Brooks and Del Rey this much, rather than taking the publishing decision that split The Lord of the Rings as a cue to make this a 3-book effort in its own right, it really is just one book, and the 2 subsequent books in the series are related but wholly separate stories, an actual trilogy in a more classical sense. But that's about all we can say in terms of relative positivity, because looking at the book now from so much distance, and especially given the explosion in range and scope of what fantastic literature is and can be, from many different and previously underheard perspectives around the world, both inside and outside the Anglosphere, there's something so incredibly baffling at thinking how this landed so well at the time, and especially given the mockery it gained as much as it gained readers. Perhaps it really was a case of any port in a storm, at a time when Tolkien's approach seemed much more immediately singular and harder to try and take as a model by others. Other writers, like Frank Herbert, and very notably, a truly much more literarily successful American heir to Tolkien, Gene Wolfe, praised Brooks's effort as helping to establish the field further, saying it was basically a good read, and that there's nothing wrong with that. Well, yeah, but our definitions of good are, how to put it, rather different, let's say. That all said, Oriana and Jared have spent the last couple of weeks in agonies in our group chat and have things to add further. It's time to open up the floor. Oh, where to begin? Which one of you wants to take the plunge?
So, let me just say, I know where you live.
Yeah.
True. You do. You have my address.
This is a bad book. This is a terrible book. And what makes it... it's bad if I'm yearning for the days of Dennis McKiernan.
Yep.
Because while he was not writing a good book, he was expanding on what was there, and there were a lot of ideas in the Silver Call duology that I was surprised by how interesting I found them, even if they were executed so terribly. And this book has maybe 2 original thoughts, and they're bad. So it's just a rehash of Lord of the Rings. Like, why anyway? Why
are we bothered?
So that's my initial reaction, is just stuttering and death threats.
Jared, I'm glad you brought up the McKiernan books right away, because the thing about those is, like, those are bad, but they're very clearly a labor of love, and like they're a guy completely out of his depth, but they're a labor of love, and I actually don't get that sense. I'm sure this was a labor of love for Terry Brooks, but it doesn't actually feel like it. None of that love actually comes out in this story because it is so thoroughly a ripoff. The characters, you can barely call them characters. The new ideas, like the political like the attempts to like bring ideas of like what form of government is best to the Lord of the Rings, it's just absolutely baffling. The prose is beyond wretched. He keeps using words in ways that I think are really incorrect and not intentionally so. Yeah, this is just there was a lot of skimming. There was a lot of skimming here. Like it was good that I guess it's good that it's one book instead of 3, but the story needed to be condensed by 2/3.
Well, what's funny is how condensed it already is, because one of the reasons you can tell it's not really a labor of love in the same way as Silver Call or Lord of the Rings is he's not interested in spending time on anything.
He wanted a page turner.
Yeah,
Right.
And he did get one in the sense that I am turning pages to get to the end as quickly as possible. But it's like there's no time given to whatever relationship these characters may have. There's no time given to what time is given to stuff is always for the worst stuff. Like you get so much about the layout of the Minas Tirith equivalent.
Yeah.
But that's it, and it doesn't really make sense. Even the geography is like he hasn't put any thought into it. These people take like a day to walk between major cities.
Yeah.
If that, it's so compressed and yet not. It's all taking place in like 6 square miles. I don't understand. What?
Baffling.
That's so strange.
The races themselves, like, I don't know. It's also like
Wait,
wait.
finish what you were saying.
Yeah, wait, hold on. We're going to put a pin in the races because that's a whole, oh my God. But I think it's really, really telling that Brooks read The Lord of the Rings and loved it and then decided for his ripoff he was going to take the ring and turn it into a weapon.
A weapon that should be used.
That can only be used by the special good boy with the special good boy blood related to the special good boy people, and he has to kill, or I guess technically it's not really, he discovers the truth. That whole thing. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. Because that was like, I was like, wait, I have been skimming, so maybe this is, and it wasn't because I was skimming. It's just, it's just bizarre. Anyway, I will stop.
The thing with the races, I kind of want to, because I will say this is maybe the one idea that I was like, there's something to this.
Right.
It, like at its base, where it's like post-apocalyptic future, the gnomes and the dwarves and whatever are all like mutated humans, which is really interesting. And like at one point they come across the ruins of a city, and it's like cool, I guess. But the way he uses the term races so constantly and keeps referring to a war of the races is like, I don't think he means it that way exactly. But it's so uncomfortable to read that phrase every chapter and completely unself-conscious about it. Like, this is the most white guy privilege thing ever, is just being able to refer to the war of the races constantly.
Because there are the races, but then everyone is referred to as, like, men. You know? It's not like orcs, elves, and they get, like, these, I can't think of the term. Anyway, like, not nicknames, but, like, the Highlander, the Valeman.
Yeah.
I hate that. I hate that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was the worst. It was awful, because I could never remember who was from where.
Yeah. Who's the Highlander? I don't know. I could probably guess.
I don't know what Highlands.
What
What are you talking about?
Yeah, that constant, the prose obviously drove me nuts, but that constant, like, he belongs to that school of writers that think if you repeat a word, you are writing poorly. So he doesn't use words like said. He uses words like responded, stated, queried, like that kind of thing. And then he'll always refer to people, because you can't use their names too often. He'll refer to them as like the Tall Highlander or the Vale Man from Shady Vale, which is like the Shire equivalent, but that's definitely like a suburban neighborhood in like the Midwest.
Yes.
And he keeps using, this is something that drives me specifically up the wall, but he'll be like, this thing caused somebody to feel this. So there's this constant delay, like, it's terrible writing, anyway, but the reason it's terrible is that you don't get the characters' reactions exactly.
Mm-hmm.
You get the author saying what their reaction is, if that makes sense. So it's that phrasing of constantly just saying caused it came up like in the first 2 pages, and I was like, oh no. And then every page after that, literally, I'm not even exaggerating. It's so terrible.
We're constantly being held at arm's length from these characters.
Yeah.
That's like the most, like, that's like the granular way, I think, that we're being held at arm's length, but there are these sort of larger ways where we went nuts in the group chat over this, where everyone is constantly reflecting and thinking back on things that have happened, and some of them we've seen, and like it's like, I already read about this, I really don't need more of this. And then sometimes it's stuff that happened off screen.
This goes back to it's not a labor of love thing, because somebody will be like reflecting about, oh, it's so great how our friendship has progressed in the last few days. Like every chapter somebody does that, and it's like, instead of doing that, what you could do is show their friendship. And then the reader is involved in that. And this is, so people unfairly ding Tolkien for thin character writing, but what he's doing most of the time is it's invisible in a good way, because you get to see the people interacting, you get a sense of the relationship. And that's why when Sam and Frodo get separated by the spider, it's like, no, this sucks, because I love them and I love the relationship. But when a similar kind of thing happens in Sword of Shannara, you're like, they didn't actually talk to each other ever.
Yeah.
So when they're upset about this, it doesn't land.
No, it does not. So, boy, yeah, let's, we're not going to march through every plot point here, but we'll just sort of take
It would just be reciting Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, it would be kind of pointless, as Jared has already pointed out. Yeah, Shady Vale, where we start things, is very clearly the Shire, except Shire as suburban subdivision indeed. And yeah, that is one of the weird things about it, is like every so often, I think in, the Hildebrand paintings, of which one we could say more, and we probably will, try and emphasize, it's like they're supposed to be hobbity here, kind of, but not.
Yeah, they're sort of short, but that's it.
Yeah, and one is a half-elf, kind of.
Somehow.
And we're never told what that means. What do any of these, like, what does being an elf mean in this world? What does being a dwarf mean in this world, aside from, like, being short? What does being a gnome mean, outside of having yellow
being a
skin?
gnome means really uncomfortable racial coding in every single... If you thought Lord of the Rings was racist.
Yeah.
Sword of Shannara is like, what if there were gnomes, and they were short and yellow and had horrible pagan ceremonies to propitiate mountain spirits, and also they were really stupid and tribal? What if all of that, like,
and they speak this, like, horrible, like, nonsense language.
Yeah.
Like the orcs, we've gone over the orcs a lot in other episodes. There's some racial coding happening, but they're still
it's
like,
bad.
but they come across more as like working class Britons, and they get to be funny, they get to be interesting. The gnomes just get to be like scary indigenous people, which is not great.
It's like only one gnome as such that we get to talk to, that Ord Fane character, and all he is just sort
who's
of
like Gollum, but not
what
really.
Are the names?
The names
are terrible. The names are truly one of the worst things about this book. Absolutely. I mean, we should, here's the thing. If you've never read this book, one, lucky you. Two, Shannara is not the first name of something. It's the last name of something. It's the last name of an elf. The elf is an elf king from years ago called Jared Shannara. And if you're wondering how Jared is spelled.
Such poetry. Such majesty.
Jared Shannara.
Yeah, Jared is spelled, if it is pronounced that way, I don't want to know, Jerle. Yeah.
Like if it were like Yerli.
Yeah, it'd be more interesting.
That would be slightly better, I guess. But like oral like no orc has a last name. Like, why do these people? Why do they have surnames? Why?
I mean, it's fine for them to have surnames. It's just that it's really inconsistent. It's like, some elves do, and some elves don't, and some dwarves have, like, one name, and some gnomes have one name. And it's just, you could not... I feel like at the very least, in a fantasy story, you should be able to guess where a character is from based on their name, and you can't.
And yeah, I mean, we have the case that we have an elf character named Durin.
Yeah, that threw me every time.
Insane.
Every single
just
time.
Insane.
And the dwarf is named Hendel. It's like, oh, is he like... Does he make figurines in Germany? Like, what?
Yeah.
And then our if we have a hero as such, he's not really a hero. He's just a functionary who has to be somewhere to take up the sword at some point. Shay Omsford, which is like, okay, I guess. But
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, like speaking of Tolkien versus this guy in terms of writing character, Frodo like makes decisions and has a goal, and Shay is just like baggage that talks occasionally. He's such a burden.
Well, like we don't even open with him. Like we don't even meet him. Yeah.
We don't. Oh, that opening.
What is it?
So it opens with Shay's, like, basically the equivalent of Sam, Shay's half-brother or adopted brother,
something
who's
like that,
walking home in the not Shire, and he's like, does something that I hate in books where he's like, oh, for now for a second, I'll think about the scary rumors I heard about a creature that's haunting the woods. I'm done thinking about that. That wasn't obvious setup at all. And then he runs into basically Gandalf, but is for some reason a scary jerk.
Yeah.
This guy.
And then then the scary Gandalf like protects him from a Black Rider, basically, and then they go to the inn that belongs to the Omsford family.
Oh,
and
it
that's
takes
like
so long to get to the fucking inn.
It takes long to get to the inn, and then it does that. It kind of collapses the Shire and Bree sections of Lord of the Rings, so that you get to the whole thing with like Gandalf leaving a note and running away. And you can tell this book didn't actually see an editor, because Gandalf makes this call to leave this note and the 3 elf stones, and he's like, good luck using them, they'll keep you safe on your journey that I've decided you're taking. And he's out. And then Shay is like, oh, well, I've read ahead and I know I'm supposed to do this, so I will go.
Amazing how it works.
Yeah, because Brooks is a terrible writer. There should be like maybe a sense of leaving home, a sense of fear. You shouldn't be that afraid of the guy who's giving you the quest, you know?
Yeah.
And then later on, like the elf stones are like 3 blue stones that have like nebulous magical power, and not Gandalf doesn't tell him what they do. He's just like, use them, they'll keep you safe. And then later, once they meet up again in not Rivendell, Gandalf is like, oh yeah, you shouldn't really use those because they will alert the Dark Lord to your presence, and I didn't tell you because you had enough on your mind. And it's like, no, fuck you. Like, you gotta say that. If you give me a gun that will backfire in my face every time I use it, you should tell me that before you let me fire it. Anyway.
Yes, the not Gandalf, he's worth tackling a little bit here, because again, there is nothing to him as a character. His name is Alanon, which is really annoying because all I can think of is recovery programs.
Also, he's like tall, dark, and handsome too, which is bizarre.
I
don't know what's up with that.
At first I thought he was going to be like an Aragorn figure, because the way he's described is very like, oh, he's got the hood over his head and no one can see his eyes, and it's like, okay.
Yeah, there's so much made about how you can't see his eyes.
What is that? And like it's never used for anything.
He's always built up as threatening.
Yeah.
Like everybody who meets him is like, this guy scares the shit out of me. He's so scary to everybody for no reason. Like he's intentionally scary to people. But that doesn't, like, why? What is the function of that in the story? These people are doing everything that he says just because they know what kind of story they're in, and they know that they have to obey him. Which is not how you write.
No.
It's just there is literally no positive charisma off the character is what it is.
No.
Gandalf exudes that.
Yeah.
Gandalf is waspish. Gandalf can be intense, but Gandalf at base is someone who you can, sit down and have a conversation with, someone who is serious when needs to be serious, but is not always that. Even after he comes back, there is still that spirit in him, which is
he code switches to talk to the hobbits.
Yeah.
He's not always scary Gandalf.
Yeah.
This Gandalf is like, what if I just threaten you for no reason all the time?
All the time.
Like,
I'm going to loom over you constantly.
I'm going to hide in the shadows and reach out. Like, are you kidding me? I'm going to attack you in the woods? What?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't help at all that, the first things we see, the not Nazgul, or the Skull Bearers or whatever they're called.
Skull Bearers. Oh, God. The Skull Bearers from the Skull Kingdom. They're the servants of the Skull Lord.
This is like rejected He-Man nonsense.
Oh,
God.
More on them in a quick second, but I'm looking at the first painting in the book from the Hildebrands, and it's sort of like, you get our 2 very hobbity looking our Valemen here, and Alanon sort of half crouching, half sitting below a tree, and it's all just in the shadows. He's got this thing. It's sort of like he looks like somebody out of a Bible illustration. Probably
I was going to say he looks like he's from the Middle East. Like what?
And fine if so, but no, it's sort of like an immense big sword. And again, we're used to, Gandalf the Grey, Gandalf the White. Here's a guy here, I'm all in black, and he only ever seems to be sternly marching around. It's sort of like, why am I following you?
And he doesn't even do much.
He doesn't.
What exactly does he do?
He knows a lot. We find, by the way...
He knows a lot, but he will never tell you.
But he doesn't tell you.
Absolutely not.
And not in a Gandalf way, but in a way where it's like, this would solve a lot of stuff if I told you right now, but I'm not going to because...
Actually, I'm writing the book.
Yeah.
In one of the world's worst non-spoiler, twists that we're seeing, because this is not a spoiler, this is just dumb. We find out at the end that he's been around for like centuries, and he apparently he's like cicadas. He comes back, he's sort of like, I'm here briefly, and then I have to go to sleep again for like...
Then I have to go nap because I used my magic.
Yeah. And it's sort of like great, which explains how he pops up again in the later books. It's like, next following generation, blah, blah, blah. So things like that. So yeah, so it's really weird. I mean, stepping aside from these characters as such, to the whole point of it, it's so singularly weird to have something that was a hit and was something that a lot of people loved and read when you have such an unlikable core. You have this nothing of our lead guy, who again is one of the first things he's introduced to is sort of like, are you a libertarian? What is your deal?
Yeah.
Talking about
Why is he? There's this whole thing about like, oh, my views on centralized government, and I'm like, what? Story am I in suddenly? What is going on? And it doesn't matter. It never comes up. It's just like, I don't know how am I friends with a prince if I hate centralized government, and that's it. That's it. What is that doing there?
And arguing just for the sake of arguing, which it's just. I'm so tired.
Not that I want to hang around with any of these characters, but I'd rather hang around with Flint than Shay, because Flint's are like, okay, well, you're not much, but you'll just sit there and nod along. Whereas Shay will be like, let me suddenly expound on things to you. It's like, no, go away. You're annoying. It's truly weird. And yet, yes, the Skullbears, yes, the figures of evil. This is just really... the evil in this one, let's put it this way: Sauron, Morgoth, truly terrifying senses of the divine, prehistory, incorporating these things, across the century, thousands of years, millennia, whatever, and all the rest of it. Our bad guy here is some dumbass.
He's the warlock
named
lord.
Brona.
Named Brona.
Yeah, Brona, the dark bro.
Come on.
Well, it was so baffling reading this, because Tolkien has a very clear idea of what evil is, what he thinks evil is, and what its effects on the world are, and what it means to be in contact with it for a long period of time, or to be evil yourself. He's got a complex view of this. It's not it, and this book is just like, evil is when there's a black scary thing,
but this is not
the
complex,
most...
Jared. This is more. This is,
do tell.
some people are sort of evil sometimes, and not others. And every once in a while, we get a line about that, and that's it. But that's more complex because Terry Brooks was like, it's not too much just like black and white, good and evil in Lord of the Rings. It's like, oh, no, you didn't. No, you didn't say that. No, stop it.
Well, that feeds back into the issues with Al-Anon, the Gandalf guy, is that because Brooks is consistently like, a dark thing is scary, and that's evil. And then we have the guy running around in black who's scary, but also on the good side. And it's like, I don't know, because of the parameters that you are setting up, I don't know what you think is happening here. And not in a cool, like, ooh, what's really going on way, but like, you made scary dark things because the thing that you're ripping off of has some scary dark things in it, and that's the extent of your views on morality, and the rest of it is a couple comments about centralized government.
It's so
which is it bad? Who knows?
Yeah, like it feels like this was a guy who wanted to write this book and be in conversation with Tolkien, but like didn't know how to do that.
So he didn't is the thing. So this is where the Faulkner bit comes in, because if you look on Wikipedia, they'll refer to, he says like he was inspired by Lord of the Rings, but his real inspiration is Faulkner. And I was like, having read this book, this is no Faulkner. But then the thing that Wikipedia cites is his TED Talk called Why I Write About Elves. And I went and watched it so that nobody else had to.
Thank you, Jared.
It's only 15 minutes long, and he's surprisingly charming. Like for the first 5 minutes, I was like, "Oh, well, maybe he's actually got something worthwhile to say." Spoiler: he does not. But his thing is, so he read Lord of the Rings, liked it, obviously. But then in college, he encountered Faulkner. and he was like, what I wanted to do was write things that had the moral weight of Faulkner, that actually grapple with real-world questions in a fantasy setting. And then he goes on to be like, what if climate change was magical? What would you do? And that's not interesting. Or I forget the other example, but it was equally just, it was stupid. And I was sitting there like, you didn't read Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Because it's not doing allegory the way you think apparently is the way to grapple with real-world questions, but it is. It's doing, like, even obviously doing stuff with PTSD, and it's asking all these questions, it's doing all of this stuff, and if you think that has no weight, but Faulkner does because it's the real world, why are you writing fantasy? Because you are misunderstanding the point of the book that you read. What makes you think that you can do that yourself? It literally, he doesn't seem to think that the fantasy that came before him is doing what he wants his books to do. Mm-hmm. He's not capable of seeing that somehow. And it drove me nuts watching this and going, what do you think? What do you think you read?
Yeah, the plasticity of the ring, as I've said before in other episodes, and by plasticity I mean the fact that it's mutable, the fact that it's something that it is a moral question, it is something that it is the lens, etc. As opposed to, as Oriana rightly pointed out, I get sword. So yeah. Even though he tries at the very end to make it some sort of moral telling thing, which is like, oh, what?
No. What it's the Sword of Shannara is the therapy blade. Like that. What it does, it's literally it's so stupid. It like shows you the truth, like heavy air quotes, shows you the truth. So when Shay touches it for the first time, he's like, "Oh, I'm just like a little guy in the world, and I'm gonna look at all of the bad stuff I've done. I'm not worthy to touch this or whatever," which is something that not Gandalf knew would happen when he touched it, but didn't warn him. And then the way it defeats the Dark Lord is it's really unclear whether he actually like hits him with it or
does he end up touching it? He ends up touching it.
It's so ambiguous. Like, at least tell me whether or not your hero stabbed the villain. I need to know. And then the truth that it tells the Dark Lord is like, you can't escape death forever, and that's what kills him. Spoiler warning, I guess. Who cares?
Who cares?
Who cares? And that drove me nuts. I keep using that phrase, but this book just...
And you touched upon a very key point that we'd like to bring up. Another thing that, again, Tolkien, the fact is Sauron is ultimately, we don't see. He is this, mysterious figure away.
Mm-hmm. The right call based on...
Yeah, the right call. The right call, because Brooks here, after a certain point in the book, all of a sudden we get a bird's eye, we go right into the central chamber or whatever of the Barad-dûr equivalent, and we get to meet Brona and his various
and he's just
minions.
Doing Maleficent in Sleeping Beauty.
Yeah.
That's all that happens in that scene.
Yep.
Apparently we learn he has little minions sitting around going, where is he? He's going to hurt us again. Yeah. And the skull creatures come in and go like, hi, we're here, the Nazgul knockoffs
we're also
you ordered.
here too, yeah.
Yeah. We're collecting our paycheck. We were contracted to be here.
I gotta clock out. Byrne is a real hard ass about
real stickler.
Clocking in and out. Time card fraud.
Yeah. Which that would have been an interesting vision of evil.
Right?
That's not what happened.
We don't even have that. So, yeah, there's various attempts at explaining the deeper histories beyond the post-apocalyptic stuff that is one of those things sort of like the mental, the nothing.
There's so much nothing.
The sheer glop of it all. At a certain point, we basically get the sidetrack to learn about the Elven kingdoms, like, internal political battles over engagement with the outside world. It's like, we did not need this. Nobody needed this.
Well, it's so inorganic.
It's inorganic. It could have been an interesting aspect, like an element of suspense, because we get the elves doing the whole like Ride of the Rohirrim thing to get to not Minas Tirith in time, and he tries to set up the suspense of like the king is missing, and he's the one who really wanted to be sort of interventionist and anti-isolationist. With him gone, they don't know what they're doing. Some of them want to stay isolated, some of them want to intervene, and it's supposed to set up suspense over whether they will get involved and tilt the balance in the favor of the good guys. But because all he does is have characters talk about it now and then, like, it sure would be a shame if the elves didn't intervene, is basically the thing. It's like,
And within the space, as you described, it's like simultaneously, as you said, it feels like it's supposed to be like 6 square miles, but they make it seem like it's like 600 when they're
they
talking
talk about it.
Yeah.
They talk about it in 600 miles terms, but then they walk for hours and they are there.
Yeah.
Wherever they're going, they walk for a few hours and they get there.
It's like, we spent a day. Hey, we're here. And so it makes all these descriptions of like, this vast mountain chain. I'm like, that we've just seen. And I'm like, sounds like you could have seen it from anywhere you were at, because that's what mountain chains are supposed to be.
Yeah, and vast. they cross the mountains in a few hours on foot. And having driven through mountains in a few hours, on foot, and that's with modern roads.
Yeah.
No.
You're not doing this in the 2 hours or whatever it is you said. There's not, what are you talking about?
Also, their path is like a circle, and it was so confusing. I was like,
there's
wait,
so much
what?
doubling back.
Yeah, it's basically this huge arc, except someone goes over and all that. So we should note at some point that Shay eventually gets a couple of buddies.
Oh my god, and they turn up so late in the narrative. It's like, wait, why didn't we just use 2 of the other guys who were already there? But no, 500 pages in, we get new guys.
And these new guys are like, it was written beforehand. It came out at the same time, so I wouldn't call it exact knockoff. But they're essentially the Han Solo and Chewbacca of this story.
Yep.
One is the rogue who turns out to have something of a heart of gold, and the other one is his big hulking companion who turns out to be a troll. And it's one of those things that when I re-encountered the illustration that's at the very end of the book, where you get to see both of them first time, it's sort of like, what the? Where? What? Thank you, Hildebrand brothers. Once again, the Hildebrands have a lot to answer for with the visual depictions throughout this book, I have to say. So it's
No, that Han Solo guy was like,
he has a really dumb name too.
Panama Creole? Are you kidding me?
Creole?
And he's such a weird character because he shows up clearly because Brooks is like, I don't know what to do. That is the sole purpose, is just running out of inspiration and throwing in a D&D character here. And they don't, he and Shay are supposedly becoming friends over the course of their journey is kind of what you're supposed to be thinking. And then
Really?
and then spoilers, I don't care. I don't care. Neither should you.
I take your point.
He Shay thinks he's dead at some point, after he defeats the Dark Lord. He's like, rocks fall on everybody except for Shay, and he's like, oh, well, they're all dead, and this is so sad. And it's like,
is it?
Is it? I didn't.
Not feeling broken up here.
Yeah, there's so much time spent in this journey through Mordor section of the book where the 3 of them are slogging towards the Dark Lord, and he keeps talking about and they had a soul searching conversation that night by the fire. The next morning, and where's the relationship? There is none. And then this guy who shows up again, 500 pages in, you think he's dead. Shay goes back home, everything's fine, and then the last page is oh, this stranger showed up, and it's obviously him.
Yeah.
And it's if you want that moment to land, why didn't you have this guy be better?
And have him be part of the crew earlier. It clearly needed to be one of the other guys. What about the elves? The elves don't do shit. What are they doing there? There's 2 of them. It was
so funny.
Yeah, twin annoying Legolases.
I lost it the first time they showed up because they're just with Gandalf, and they're just these 2, he shows up with 2 elf twinks in his entourage, and that's for the longest time, that's all they do, is just kind of it's almost like he has them on a leash. He doesn't literally, but the vibe is just he's traveling with these 2. It's so.
But don't worry, one of them is supposed to be getting married. No homo.
The no homo in this book is off the charts.
It is insane. Yeah,
everyone's got a case of the not gays.
Everyone is clearly in love with some other guy.
Right?
Until we finally get, 500 pages in, a woman?
456
and she sucks!
Pages.
She sucks so badly!
She doesn't do... She does, diddly squat. There's no...
People ding Tolkien, again, for not having a ton of women in his books. But we get Galadriel. We get Éowyn. They have stuff to do, and they are cool. In this book, we get Shirl, which is like
again with the name.
that's a receptionist name. That is a receptionist name. She's like a princess, kind of, but not really.
She has red hair because
she has red
what is
hair.
with straight men and red hair? What is it? I have never met a straight man who like wasn't just like turned into one of those weird cartoon wolves whenever someone so much as mentions a lady has like red hair. It is truly disturbing. So good to know Terry Brooks is no exception to this rule.
Keeping the fire burning. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, she shows up. She gets rescued by the guy who's like kind of Aragorn, but not. And her entire storyline is just like the love interest with no personality, which is a huge step backward from Tolkien. If you are less progressive than Tolkien, you have
yikes on bikes.
Badly screwed up.
Really badly. So
yeah. Oh, and that led into when she's like, not really. I forget. She's not a princess, but she kind of is. Whatever her status is, this city with 40,000 people. We get an exact number, which is always a mistake.
Yes. Sign on the city limits saying that or whatever.
Yeah. You are now entering Kern. Population 40K. The forces of evil are coming, and this guy Menion or whatever his name is like the British are coming. We gotta leave. And so they somehow he convinces the city council, you got to evacuate. Trust me, I'm like a ragged wanderer from the wilderness, but I have a cool sword, so you got to trust me. And they're like, okay, we trust you. You've got a cool sword. And they have one night to evacuate a city of 40,000 people, and they do it. And there is not a single drop of suspense over this evacuation.
No.
They somehow, it's a city in the middle of a river. They somehow are able to build enough rafts to move a population of 40,000 people out of sight of the evil army overnight. And that's the entire, it drove me nuts. Like, how do you evacuate a city that large in the middle of a river overnight and nobody knows about it?
This all has real citation needed.
Yes. Yeah.
It really does, yeah. And geez, our final battle as such at the city, the Minas Tirith equivalent.
Oh, I cannot tell you how hard I skimmed that. All of that.
I gave it a shot. I did. I tried, and I couldn't. It was so like, I don't know who this person is.
Yeah.
We're just suddenly supposed to care about this guy just because he has a name?
Yeah.
Like, what if Boromir were less interesting?
Yeah. And what's his name? Baromir or something like that? Or what was his name?
It's like Boromil or something? No.
Balinor.
Oh, jeez.
Balinor or whatever. And his brother's name is Palance. Like,
that's
Jack
right.
Palance?
As in Jack. Yeah.
What the fuck?
He has a last name too, doesn't he? Has he a ridiculous last name as well?
Yeah, it's the Buckhannas. The House of the Buckhannas.
What are we doing
Buckhanna.
here? I just...
And then there's the weird little evil guy, the evil mystic, who I kind of love because he's just so stupidly coded, and he's basically sort of like, he's always, tugging his beard or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's how you know he's evil instead of twirling his mustache.
Yeah. And he's always like whispering in the ear of the prince, who's the Theoden equivalent. It's so, you've succeeded in life if you have gotten to this level of power where nobody can be like, this guy's obviously out to screw us over. It was very Trump White House vibe, this guy.
It is very much a whisperer, if you will. And it's one of those things that, also just, again, the feel of none of this. Brooks does not know how to write landscapes.
No. Okay, I'm glad you said that because I notoriously have the, not able to make pictures from words, most of the time, very, very difficult for me. And it was even worse than usual this time. I was like, I have no concept of what the fuck is happening here. What is this supposed to look like? He's so bad at it.
I guess if I had to sort of sum up a lot of what this book is trying to do, it feels like a very, very badly directed D&D campaign where the dungeon master is literally making the maps while he's talking to people, or she. And it has and
is so tired that he's just like, do whatever. I don't even care anymore. Sure, about this because you were here before and it was never mentioned.
Right.
Yep.
Sure, you succeeded on your wisdom saving. Of course, you knew about the dungeons. You knew about them. We don't know. You were here. That's all. You were here before and somebody mentioned it in your hearing.
That was so bizarre.
I hated that. Again, this is like an editing failure. Bring this up earlier. You can't just have characters suddenly know things. You just can't. Unless there are extremely rare circumstances where you can, I would say. But this happens all the time in the book.
In looking at this stupid map, which I notice is totally uncredited in terms of who wrote it, so whoever did that was probably like, just give me the money and just like I will go away. Is that
I respect the hustle.
Yeah, is that literally everything on it is mentioned is basically a spot that they visit. In other words, unlike the Middle Earth map, which purposely gives you places and things that we don't go to, this is like, here's a map, everything's mentioned, we must go everywhere. It's almost sort of like, did the map come first? It's sort of like, I will make sure we go to every spot on this map. It almost has that feeling. So it just is, so defeating. And there are so many other weird little moments where you're sort of like, wow, you were meant to make something profound happen there, and it didn't. I think my favorite is when our Chewbacca troll, if you will, the guy who's with our Han Solo, is revealed in the tribal troll meeting of their own city council and all the rest of it to be the equivalent of a Legion of Honor winner. That medal,
which means all the trolls instantly are like, "Oh, well, this guy, we got to do whatever he says." Yeah, and I was like, "That's not how any society works."
I was about to say that's a rather reasonably trusting society. No, really, the medal says you should follow me.
If some guy with the whatever that Congressional Medal of Honor or whatever showed up and was like, "We have to do this thing. Trust me, I've got this medal," I'd still be like, "Are you sure?"
Right?
Can you? Did you steal that? Are you like what? Like you're telling me to do something that? What is it? He asks the trolls who are like kind of villainous to like basically go against their programming.
Yeah.
Like, and they just are like, "Oh, well, you've got the trinket, so we got to do it," which is so crazy.
It's so weird given the length of this book and like the events that could be expounded upon in a way that is like interesting and full of story, and then all of the ways that it isn't and yet other stuff just goes on way too long, like who did what doing dinner, just kill
don't
me.
Need to know.
And just and there in terms of like I don't want to say this was the only effective sequence, but it was the wonderfully illustrative sequence. Let's say it's the bit where Okay, all right. So we mentioned about sometime back, again, post-apocalyptic, and there's a bit where they basically go to what is clearly the ruins of an old, equivalent 20th century city or whatever, and they're being directed that way. What happens is Al-Anon has gone on ahead from everybody, because that's what you want to do. You want to send your chief person who's keeping everything together up ahead of everyone else.
Of course.
So brilliant planning. And he's going to leave little marks along the way to show you where to go. Little marks of cloth. And what's great is that without this, and again, I'll give Brooks this much. He describes a presence, a clearly evil presence, which Al-Anon senses somehow. Okay, hand wave that. And what's great is that this presence, which we don't learn about till later, which is kind of one of the more weirdly, what is this thing? I'll give him that much of out there, even if it's the Watcher of the Water equivalent kind of type thing, though not on the water, is that basically it comes up to where Al-Anon is basically set up, okay, I'll set the path here so everyone goes over here. It comes up, and basically Brooks writes it out as laughing to himself, going these guys are stupider than I thought they would. All I have to do is take down the things and they'll be like that. And I'm like, I like the idea of our great noble hero, even though he's this weird, dark, scary guy, basically a villain coming and going one idiotic jerk, this is all I have to do to screw up their plans. And he does.
And that would have been, if that had matched the tone of the rest of the book, that would have been fun. I could have rolled with that. Maybe. Hopefully.
Maybe. Well, I did. So this is one of the bits where it's you could have done so much more with the setting that you have given yourself.
Right.
Is that this creature is I see it more as the Shelob equivalent.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah.
Even if it's out in the wrong, heavy air quotes, the wrong spot.
But yeah.
Is that it's this weird half robot, half flesh thing that has kind of mutated itself, not mutated, caused itself to mutate, but it has itself mutated over the long years since the fall of modern society. And it's like a hungry robot, and it's smart enough to do these kinds of things, and it's venomous somehow, and it's really creepy. But that is the one time that the setting actually matters. This could be anywhere at any time. It could be it's so generic outside of this one scene, and it was like if I had read this. Like Beta read this for him, I would have been like, we can scrap so much else, but this is where the story is that these ruins, what are they doing there? These people don't even really question it. They're just kind of like, yeah, that's the old world. Okay. And not in a way that makes it seem like this is normal for them, because it clearly isn't.
Yeah.
They're just kind of like, concrete? Okay. I don't know. But there's so much you could do with this idea that he is not interested in. And it's what makes it irritating is that like Middle-earth is kind of an empty setting because Middle-earth is itself kind of post-apocalyptic. But you still run into these things constantly, like these remnants of older things. And in Sword of Shannara, there isn't any of this except for this one scene.
Yeah.
Where's all of the old stuff? It can't all be gone. Like, give me a city that's built on the ruins of an older city. Like, surely something has been preserved intact. Like Damascus is freaking like 6,000 years old or whatever. Not really, but it's really old. There's got to be an equivalent here. People do keep returning to the same places over and over to rebuild.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. That's one idea. There are so many ways that you could make this setting, which is, again, I think a cool idea, into something very much its own instead of just going, oh, Lord of the Rings? Okay, well, we'll rearrange the letters in Frodo's name to produce this. Like, anyway.
Frodo. And all that. So, well, I have a last thing to say and all that. Do you have a last thing, Oriana?
This, like, just from top to bottom, this was just, like, incomprehensibly awful. And I'll never get that time back.
No, you won't. And the only other thing I'll say is that due in part to the success of a certain series of films, eventually the Shannara stuff did get adapted for TV about 10 years ago. Bemusingly, Austin Butler, who's currently riding high with a lot of stuff, was cast as lead in that one. We should note, however, that they did not adapt Sword of Shannara. They actually wisely went to the second book to adapt Elfstones of Shannara, precisely because I'm sure they realized, oh, gee, if we adapted the first book, that might raise some questions. And given the casting, that was actually important because besides Austin Butler playing our lead in that one, who's supposed to be like the kid of Shay Omsford or something, I forget the deal and all that, is that John Rhys Davies had a role in the TV series. Only this time he played an elf rather than a dwarf. You see, that's how you can tell them apart.
There was also Manu Bennett.
Who
was, what's the guy, what was the orc's name in
the
white
Azog.
orc? And,
Azog in those
he
films,
was that.
And it also had Ivana Baquero from Pan's Labyrinth.
And Jed Brophy, who works as a New Zealand actor, worked with the Jacksons on both sets of films and other things. So weird connections. Definitely not as good. So, and with that, I think we're done and we can move on. Letting that go.
Close this chapter of our lives.
Yes. Okay, time to look ahead to the next episode. The choice of topic has come around to Oriana. What are we talking about next time?
I guess we're just going to talk about the Rohirrim as
all right,
as people and other talking points that I will come up with at a different point in time. That is not now. But no, there's a lot there. I feel like it's interesting. Yeah. So we'll just talk about them.
Hey, the Anglo-Saxon Cossacks themselves, to borrow a term from Diana Wynne Jones, although it's probably been used by others. So, all right. So we'll do the Horse Lords next time. Yeah, I'm kind of glad we didn't have an exact Horse Lords equivalent in this one, although we just had its own thing. But let's forget it. We've talked about books. We never mentioned the name again. so moving on.
It's gonna haunt my dreams.
Yeah. Oh my God. Our nightmares. So with that said, we hope you've all survived, much like we have, sort of. Thank you, as always, very much for listening. We absolutely appreciate it. Again, you can find us on social media. At Blue Sky in particular is where the By-The-Bywater account is, and that's where we all are individually as well as many other social media spots online. You can also keep track of us through our website, megaphonic.fm/By-The-Bywater. We should note that our beloved Lord and Master, if you will, of Megaphonic, Chris, is finishing up a redesign of the website. And in fact, possibly even by the time this episode airs, if not sometime very soon, that should actually go live, you'll have a chance to see how that looks. So we'll always appreciate feedback. We hope you enjoy it. And of course, if you're just simply listening to us through various podcast services, hey, nothing changes. It'll just be there, as always. And again, by-the-bywater@gmail.com if you'd like to send us a note. And certainly any testimonials, reviews, things like that left anywhere, we really appreciate it. We've been doing this for you for 5 years. We've been doing this for ourselves for 5 years. We will continue on because there's always more to talk about somehow. So, and that's a good thing.
4 more years.
Yeah,
4 more years.
Elect us. So we'd be so much better. So with that said, thank you again, and we will talk to you next time. Until then.